In the second year that I had feelings for Chloe, I decided it was time to let go. I orchestrated a quiet retreat from her life, starting by switching my seat to the other side of the classroom. I stopped initiating conversations and made a conscious effort to keep a physical and emotional distance between us. It was around that same time that a close friend of mine, Maya, transferred back to our school. We had been in the same social circles for years, so her return felt seamless and natural. Maya and I quickly fell into a comfortable routine, walking to and from school together and spending most of our free time in each other's company. One afternoon, a mutual friend jokingly nudged Chloe, saying, "Looks like Alex finally gave up on you and found a new target. What do you think about that?" Chloe didn't respond. Not with a single word. Her silence lasted until the day I officially dropped out of the rock climbing club, a club I had only ever joined to be closer to her. It was then that she finally looked at me, her gaze cold and sharp, and asked a question that cut deeper than her silence ever could. "Alex, do rich people like you always do whatever you want? Are you only interested in things for 3 minutes?" Before Maya's transfer, I truly had been on the verge of giving up on Chloe. Honestly, the final decision was made in a single, painful moment. I was standing by the back door of the club room one afternoon and overheard a conversation inside. Someone was teasing Chloe, their voice light and careless. "Chloe, why are you studying so hard? Isn't Alex into you? You know about his family, right? When he joined the school, his dad donated an entire building. He was worried Alex wouldn't like the cafeteria food, so he built a new one just for him, staffed with Michelin star chefs. I heard he's an only child. If he likes you, you could skip 60 years of hard work." Another voice chimed in. "Yeah, and you always ignore him. Are you crazy? Do you actually hate the guy?" There was a pause, a stretch of silence that felt longer than it was, and then I heard Chloe's voice. It was as cold as ice, but beneath the chill I could hear a deep, simmering annoyance. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "I can't stand him. I'd rather work hard for 80 years than take his easy way out." The room filled with the sound of laughter, a wave of mocking noise that washed over me. I stood there, rooted to the spot outside the door for a few seconds, before I turned and walked away. To be honest, until I heard that conversation, I never knew Chloe disliked me with such intensity. I spent days replaying her tone of voice in my head, searching for the genuine disgust that laced her words, trying to pinpoint what I could have possibly done to make her feel that way about me. I admit, I liked Chloe. I mean, who wouldn't have a crush on the prettiest, smartest girl in school? But I was certain I had never harassed her or made her uncomfortable. I just tried to help her out in small ways whenever I saw an opportunity. The very first time I saw her wasn't in person, but as a photograph on the school's honor wall. My dad was dropping me off for the first day of school, and he pointed to her picture on the main bulletin board. "Son," he said casually, "their top student sure is pretty." I followed his gaze and saw her smiling face, and I simply filed her away in my mind as a beautiful, intelligent student. Later that day, in class, I realized we were in the same homeroom. When my dad, who had come to meet my teacher, spotted her, he was overjoyed. He's the kind of man who can strike up a conversation with anyone, even a stray dog on the street, and talk for an hour. Embarrassed, I shot a quick, apologetic smile in Chloe's direction. She just looked at me calmly, showing no sign of annoyance at being disturbed. She simply smiled politely at my dad and thanked him for his compliments. That brief interaction caught the attention of our homeroom teacher, who decided then and there to seat us together. At first, Chloe and I got along wonderfully. She would patiently help me with homework problems I couldn't figure out. During gym class, she would practically drag me across the finish line on our long-distance runs. Sometimes, if she was heading to the school store, she'd even pick up a drink for me without me asking. She even covered for me on multiple occasions when I was secretly reading novels under my desk during a lecture. But after class, she would look at me with a serious expression and say, "Alex, you're lazy, and you're not particularly good at studying or sports. What's your plan for the future?" Then, with a sigh, she'd sit down and help me with my work, her face set in a cold, determined mask. I would always just laugh it off, nudging her playfully. "That's what you're here for, right? My brilliant deskmate. If things go bad, I'll just have to hang on to you for dear life, and you'll never be able to shake me off." Chloe would just look at me then, her beautiful amber eyes staring right through me. They reminded me of the cat's eye marbles I used to collect as a kid. If you looked at them for too long, you felt like you could get lost inside them. My face would get warm, and I'd feel flustered. She would almost smile, the corners of her mouth twitching, before her expression would return to its usual neutrality as she went back to helping me with my assignments. Before everyone at school knew that my dad was one of the wealthiest men in the city, Chloe and I were just two normal classmates who got along well. She only started to become distant after a post about my family's background went viral on the school forum. The post detailed how my dad had donated the new science building and claimed the new, high-end canteen was built exclusively for me. It said the food prices were kept low because my dad was subsidizing the cost out of his own pocket, and that there was a private room in the canteen reserved for me that no one else was ever allowed to use. Some parts of the post were wildly exaggerated. My dad did donate the building, but it was because he valued education. Having grown up poor, he understood how important a good school environment was. The canteen wasn't built for me. He just wanted all the students to have access to good, nutritious meals. During his own school days, he had often survived on nothing more than a plain bun with some chili sauce. My dad always said it's important to give back to the community when you're able to, and he hoped that future generations of students wouldn't have to go through the same hardships he did. The post gained a lot of traction, and soon classmates were constantly approaching me, asking, "Alex, is it all true?" The attention was frustrating, so one day I tried to vent to Chloe about it. She was sitting next to me, calmly reading a book. Chloe was incredibly smart. She could multitask effortlessly. In the beginning, I was hesitant to bother her while she was reading, but she had assured me it was fine. She said the book wasn't that difficult, and my idle chatter wouldn't distract her. Later, I made it a point to test this, asking her questions while she was working through complex math problems. She could simultaneously solve intricate equations on her scratch paper while carrying on a conversation with me. But one day, she suddenly cut me off. Her voice was cold, laced with an irritation I had never heard from her before. "Alex," she said sharply, "can you just leave me alone, please?" My complaint died in my throat, stuck there by the sudden shock of her tone. I felt a sting of hurt, but after a moment's pause, I managed to awkwardly apologize. "Sorry, Chloe. Is the problem really tough? Okay, I'll stop bothering you." From that day on, however, her attitude toward me remained cold, even when she wasn't studying. Gradually, I found myself avoiding conversations with her. We fell into a strange, unspoken Cold War. We didn't draw a line down the middle of our shared desk, but it felt just as childish. She wouldn't talk to me, so I stopped trying to talk to her. It was like a petty squabble between children, but since she was naturally a quiet person, she was probably far less bothered by the silence than I was. Things took a definitive turn for the worse when our homeroom teacher organized a fundraiser for Chloe. Before that day, I never knew anything about her home life. We all wore the same school uniform, and she was so smart, so pretty, and carried herself with such grace that it was impossible to imagine the struggles she faced. I never would have guessed she came from a single-parent family, or that her mom was suffering from a severe kidney disease that required expensive dialysis treatments several times a month. Our teacher stood at the podium and addressed the class. Despite her challenging family situation, Chloe consistently maintains excellent grades. We have decided to organize a donation drive to support her and her family. We hope everyone can show their unity and love to help our classmate through this difficult time. Chloe was well liked by everyone. She was hardworking, mature, steady, and beautiful. A collective gasp went through the room as everyone turned to look at her. I felt an uneasy feeling stir inside me, and our silly Cold War suddenly seemed incredibly insignificant. I turned to Chloe and asked quietly, "Why didn't you ever mention any of this before?" She kept her head down, her eyes fixed on her book, her lips pressed into a thin, tight line. She didn't say a word. At that time, I didn't think too much about her silence. I considered us friends, though perhaps that was just a one-sided feeling on my part. I didn't stop to consider her pride or how she might feel about the whole situation. All I wanted was to help her with her problems. So, I turned to my dad. My dad acted swiftly. He arranged to cover all of Chloe's mother's medical expenses and set up a fund to cover Chloe's education costs from high school all the way through college, making the school's donation drive unnecessary. He even had her mother transferred to a private hospital at his own expense. One weekend, Chloe and her mother came to our house to thank us. I had just gotten home with my dad, and they were standing outside under the grand archway of our driveway. The sun was blazing overhead. As soon as my dad stepped out of the car, Chloe's mother knelt on the ground before him. Chloe, wearing her crisp white school uniform, rushed to help her mother up. My dad, looking flustered and embarrassed, hurried to help as well. Chloe's mother held onto his hand tightly and said, "We can never repay your kindness. From now on, Chloe is yours to command as you wish." I was completely dumbstruck, standing a few feet behind my dad, not knowing what to do or say. As I glanced over at Chloe, she looked up and her eyes met mine. Her gaze was deep and unreadable, just staring at me. I don't know why, but in that single moment it felt like something inside of her had vanished. She had always seemed mature for her age, but there had always been a hint of a girlish spirit in her eyes. Now that seemed to be completely gone. Looking back on it now, I realized that she probably didn't want me there at all in that moment of profound humiliation. From that day forward, I tried my best to mend our fractured relationship. Every morning I brought her breakfast. During breaks, I would buy her a bottle of water. I used to do these things for her even before all of this happened, back when I was just Alex, her deskmate, and she never seemed to mind. But now, she wouldn't accept anything from me. It felt like accepting my small gifts would be akin to accepting charity. But weren't things like breakfast and water just simple, friendly gestures between classmates? It didn't make any sense to me. On her birthday, I even bought her a new pair of running shoes, but she refused to accept them. Soon, all sorts of rumors began to circulate that I had a crush on Chloe. I never denied them or tried to explain because in my heart, I knew I wasn't being entirely straightforward with her, and a part of me hoped that she might actually like me too. After all, she used to indulge me and care for me in a way she didn't with anyone else. My misguided hope lasted until the day I overheard her talking outside the rock climbing club, saying those words with such conviction, "Yes, I can't stand him." All right then. As much as I wanted to patch things up between us, I wasn't going to force myself on someone who clearly didn't want me around. If she disliked me, so be it. I had to move on. By the time Chloe returned to the classroom, I was calmly seated at my desk. I had stopped trying to talk to her after the day her mother came to thank my dad. Before that, I used to rack my brain every day for things to talk about, despite her persistent coldness. But now, I didn't bother anymore. I'm a generally easygoing person. I've never really gotten into arguments with others. Growing up, everyone always said I had a good temperament. But even the calmest person has their limits. When Chloe came back and sat down, I shifted my chair slightly away from her, creating a small but deliberate distance. I sensed her stiffen beside me, probably confused by my sudden action, but I kept my head down, my eyes fixed on my book, not sparing her a single glance. During math class, I was completely zoned out. The teacher called on me to answer a problem on the board. I looked up at the complex equation, hesitating, when Chloe suddenly slid her notebook over to me, placing it right under my nose. Our little exchange was completely visible from the teacher's podium, but the teacher didn't say anything. Chloe had written out every step of the solution so clearly, as if she was afraid I wouldn't be able to understand it. I paused for a moment, looking down at her neat handwriting, and then I looked up at the math teacher. "Sorry, teacher," I said clearly. "I don't understand it." The math teacher seemed a bit taken aback, then said, "Okay, I'll explain it again. Those who didn't understand, please pay attention and don't daydream. Learning is for your own benefit, Alex. You can sit down for now." As I sat back down, I noticed Chloe's hand, which was gripping her pen, had frozen in place. She seemed to be using quite a bit of force, because her knuckles had turned white. After a few seconds, she silently took back the notebook that was lying in front of me. I didn't say anything to her. That silence continued until the end of the school day. To be honest, I felt a little bit sad. Even though I had made up my mind to move on, Chloe was still sitting right next to me. It was hard to ignore her presence when she was so close. I thought that maybe, after some time had passed, I could talk to the teacher about changing seats, about not sitting next to Chloe anymore. I just needed to come up with a good reason, something that wouldn't make it too obvious. I was lost in these absent-minded thoughts when someone tapped on the window next to me. "Someone's looking for you," a girl whispered. The two girls who had tapped on the window were making funny faces at me and giggling. "Alex, it's a real beauty. You better come out." I was puzzled, but I got up and went outside. Standing in the hallway outside our classroom was the real beauty. She was tall and slender, leaning casually against the wall. She wasn't wearing a school uniform, just a simple white dress. She had soft, gentle features and a calm aura that seemed to ignore all the curious glances from other students in the hallway. She glanced over at me and offered a soul-warm smile, softly calling my name. "Alex." I was shocked and overjoyed. "Maya," I exclaimed, taking 2 quick steps to reach her. "When did you get back?" She looked down at me, her smile widening. "Just a week ago. I came back to handle some things here first. I just finished transferring to this school today, so now I'm your upperclassman, and I came to say hi." I was genuinely excited. "Transfer? Did your uncle and auntie come back too?" She laughed, seeing my unrestrained excitement. "Yeah, this time it's for good. No more going abroad." I looked at her, smiling with pure joy. Maya used to live next door to me when I was little. Back then, my dad was always busy starting his business, so he would often leave me with the auntie next door. Sometimes when she had to go out, it was Maya who would look after me. Even though we were about the same age, she was always like a big sister to me. There's still an album at my house filled with pictures of me as a baby in a crib, with her standing beside me, holding a milk bottle and feeding me. As we got older, she would take me to climb trees, tell me stories, and take me out to play. Our families were always incredibly close, until 5 years ago when her dad, a diplomat, was promoted and had to move abroad for his job. I cried for days when she left. I remember holding onto her sleeve at the airport, refusing to let go. My dad said I almost made her miss her flight. We kept in touch over the years, but not as much recently. I never thought she'd suddenly come back. "I talked to your dad about a month ago," she said. "I didn't let him tell you because I wanted to surprise you by just showing up here." She smiled and patted my shoulder. "All right, you should get back to class. I have more paperwork to handle. I'll pick you up after school." I agreed reluctantly and headed back inside just as the bell rang. Back at my seat, I couldn't wipe the smile off my face. As I approached my desk, I caught Chloe's glance through the window. Her gaze was icy, colder than it had ever been before, even during our Cold Wars. She just stared at me as I smiled, not moving an inch, even when I reached our desk. My seat was on the inside, by the window, and she was blocking my way. "Chloe, can you let me in?" I asked. She acted as if she hadn't heard me. She didn't move. She had never been like this before, and I had no idea what had made her so upset or what I had done wrong. The class was about to start, and the teacher was walking in. I was getting a bit anxious, so I said her name again, a little louder. "Chloe." She suddenly let out a soft laugh, a sound laced with a hint of mockery. "Finally willing to talk to me?" she murmured. She leaned forward just enough to let me pass to my seat, right before the teacher reached our row. She was acting completely out of character. I looked at her, but her expression had already returned to normal. I wanted to ask her what was wrong, but I swallowed the question. Forget it, I thought. It's not my business anyway. Having Maya back as a senior at my school felt like we had traveled back in time 5 years. She would wait for me at my front door every morning and then wait outside my classroom after the last bell to walk me home. Whenever she waited for me at the classroom door, the girls in my class would sigh dramatically and tease me. "Alex, your senior is here again." Some would gossip amongst themselves. "Alex, what's the deal with you and Maya?" I'd sigh and try to explain. "She lived next door to me. She just got back. She's like my sister, so don't make a big deal out of it." But for some reason, my explanation only made them more excited. "Oh, you grew up together. Maya's family must be well off then. She's pretty and rich. You two are a match made in heaven." I didn't know what to say. Even though I told them countless times that we were just like siblings, no one seemed to believe me. One afternoon, as the teasing reached a crescendo, the pen in Chloe's hand suddenly snapped in two. Blue ink spilled out, covering her hand. The girls who had been gathered around my desk looked at each other, and the teasing immediately quieted down. Chloe stood up, her face expressionless. "Excuse me," she said flatly. "I need to wash my hands." When she came back, my classmates who had been joking around my desk had already dispersed. Chloe looked at me, her face a blank mask, and said, "Can you guys gossip somewhere else next time? It's really noisy." Whether she meant it or not, she was right. Disturbing others wasn't a great thing to do. I lowered my head and apologized. "Sorry about that." Chloe stared at me for a moment, looking a bit unsettled. Her cold expression softened slightly, and she seemed like she wanted to say something, but didn't know how. I could feel her staring at me, deep in thought. After a long pause, I gathered the courage to say, "It's not good if we're disturbing your studies every day, Chloe. I'll talk to the homeroom teacher about changing my seat." The brows that had relaxed just a moment before slowly hardened again after she heard that. She looked at me coldly and said, "Do whatever you want." The very next day, I changed seats. The teacher was concerned and asked if I had had a falling out with a classmate. I explained that it was simply to avoid disturbing Chloe's studies. Chloe was like a prized treasure to our teacher, especially when it came to her grades, so he agreed to my request quickly. He asked me where I wanted to sit. Chloe sat by the window on the left side of the room, since she liked the sunlight and the breeze. I chose a desk on the far right side, by the classroom aisle. We were separated by the entire width of the room, 6 rows apart. That should make Chloe happy, I thought. The seat next to Chloe remained empty. The teacher asked if she wanted a new seatmate, but she coldly refused, saying she preferred to sit alone. Meanwhile, my new seatmate was a chatty kid who loved to gossip. Compared to him, I was practically a monk. He shared his stash of cakes and chocolates that he kept hidden under his desk, which was a much better experience than dealing with Chloe's cold demeanor. But even sitting so far away from her, I couldn't help but feel restless, like there was a big empty space inside me. Only when the teacher called on her to solve a problem on the board could I openly stare at her silhouette, lost in my thoughts. We fell into a routine of being familiar strangers. I even quit the rock climbing club, the one I had only joined to be near her. I was never into rock climbing. The day I officially quit, Chloe looked at me with open mockery. The other club members stayed silent, watching us. She asked me, "Alex, do you always bounce from one thing to another, never sticking with anything for more than a moment?" Before I could say anything, she handed me the withdrawal form. "Sign it and give it back to me," she said coldly. I took it from her and signed it without a word. After that, we had no interaction left at all. Time passed, and I gradually healed from the sadness, getting back to my usual easygoing, carefree self. That is, until Liam transferred to our school. Liam had been recruited from another school, a top student brought in to bolster our school's academic reputation. The first time I saw him, he was standing on the platform at the front of the class, introducing himself. He fit the typical smart kid image perfectly, with neat hair and a confident, self-assured aura. After his introduction, he looked straight at Chloe, smiled, and said, "Chloe, long time no see." His words made my heart tighten unexpectedly. Liam became Chloe's new seatmate. They must have met frequently at academic competitions and likely shared a lot of common interests, which would explain their easy familiarity. Between classes, I'd sometimes glance over and see them quietly discussing something. Sometimes Chloe would be frowning in concentration, and other times a small, genuine smile would grace her lips. Soon after Liam arrived, there was a statewide exam. The entire class placed bets on who would rank first, Chloe or Liam. When the results came out, Chloe had won, but the gap between their scores was less than 20 points. In the past, she was always ahead of the second-place student by over 100 points. They were both nearly perfect in all the science subjects. Their scores were posted in the classroom, and there was so much curiosity surrounding their results that the teachers had even pre-graded their exams before anyone else's. The rest of the class received our exams the following day. Chloe, as the math representative, was tasked with handing them out. My test was among the ones she distributed. When she reached my desk, I felt her pause for a moment. Then she placed my test paper down on my desk, the front page covered in red marks and a big, bold 68 out of 150. I've never cared much about my grades. My dad's only hope for me was that I lived a happy, carefree life. But staring at that 68, I suddenly felt a wave of embarrassment wash over me, especially since it was Chloe who was seeing it. To confirm my fears, she mocked me, saying, "Alex, are you planning to go to college with scores like these?" It was the first time she had spoken to me directly since we stopped sitting together. I silently folded the paper and tucked it inside my textbook, clearly not wanting to talk about it. Yet she stayed there and added, "If you don't understand something, you can ask me." She then explained again, her voice devoid of its earlier mockery. "Your uncle sponsors me. You can ask for help if you don't understand something." I remained silent. Chloe's frustration grew, and her tone became sharper. "Playing around all day and not having any ambition, Alex? Are you just planning to rely on your dad forever?" I finally looked up at her, feeling a spark of genuine anger for the first time. "What does it matter to you, Chloe? How I live my life, or who I rely on, has absolutely nothing to do with you. Why do you even care?" She paused, her eyes as dark as ink, looking deep into mine. I saw a hint of disappointment flash across her face. Then, without another word, she just walked away. On the way home that night, I was quiet, absent-mindedly kicking stones along the sidewalk. Maya asked me if I was upset. I shook my head and said no. Then she asked me what my plans were for the future. I looked at her blankly. Maya smiled at me and said, "I'm planning to study abroad. Alex, after the exams this year, I'm leaving. I've suggested to your uncle that if you come with me, I can look after you until you graduate." She paused and gave me a gentle smile, then patted me on the shoulder. "Alex, the college entrance exam here might not be the right path for you. Your uncle thinks so too. He just hasn't mentioned it to you yet. You should think about it." I felt a bit down and asked her, "Maya, am I really that bad?" She laughed, her hand resting gently on my shoulder, patting it softly. "Of course not," she replied, looking at me seriously, not dismissing my feelings at all. "Everyone has different skills and strengths, Alex. Yours just don't happen to be in academics." I sighed. I went to discuss it with my dad, and it turned out he did have that thought. He had originally been uneasy about the idea of me studying abroad all by myself. But with Maya there to look after me, he felt more assured. I felt a bit lost and uncertain about the whole thing. My dad said, "Of course, it's mainly up to you to decide." Honestly, I'm reluctant. Whether you do well in the domestic exams or not, I can get you into a good university here. But sometimes I wonder if I should let you go out into the world and be independent for a bit. He sighed wistfully. I knew what he had left unsaid. He was worried about what would happen to me if he weren't around anymore to take care of me. "Let me think about it, Dad," I said. That night I tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. Before I finally drifted off, I remembered what Chloe had said to me. Messing around and not being motivated. "Alex, are you planning to rely on your dad forever?" So, over breakfast the next morning, I told my dad that I wanted to give studying abroad a shot. I told him I wanted to gain new experiences, become independent, and embrace new challenges. My dad was a mix of sadness and reluctance, but more than anything, he was pleased with my decision. I began the long process of preparing to apply for schools and handling all the necessary procedures to study abroad. I didn't tell anyone about my plans. Honestly, I'm not great at handling goodbyes. Even though I'm generally a carefree person, I get a bit lost when faced with the sadness of farewells. I managed to juggle both my classes and the endless paperwork, which meant I was going to the teacher's office a lot more often. By the time everything was finally ready, I had barely any time left to prepare myself emotionally. Sometimes I foolishly thought about leaving without telling Chloe. Maybe one day, when she found out that I had quietly gone abroad, she would regret her words, feel a little bit sad, maybe even hurt. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that she did care for me at one point, and I had considered her a friend too. Leaving without a single word seemed a bit rude. I imagined if our roles were reversed, even with things being as bad as they were between us, I'd probably feel sad if Chloe left without saying anything. So, as the time for my departure drew near, I finally decided, on the night before I was set to leave, to go back to the classroom during the lunch break. Chloe usually napped at her desk then, but when I got there, she wasn't alone. Liam was there with her. They each held a piece of chalk, standing side by side in front of the blackboard, which was covered in complex math formulas. They were discussing something intensely. Liam was writing furiously on the board, and in his excitement, he didn't notice his footing and stumbled. Chloe immediately said, "Careful," and pulled him towards her by the arm to steady him. They were standing incredibly close. I watched from the hallway window as Henry's face turned a deep shade of red. After a moment, Chloe let go of his arm and turned her gaze away, calmly asking, "Are you okay?" Liam just shook his head. Even I, an outsider, could feel the palpable tension between them. After a brief silence, they returned to discussing the problem on the board with a sense of mutual understanding. At the same time, I paused, quietly backing away from the window. I realized then that she probably hadn't even noticed why I had been visiting the teacher's office so often, or that I had taken several leaves of absence. She had a new desk buddy, new friends. They matched each other well. So it didn't matter. I turned and left as quietly as I had come. When I returned home, it was 9 years later. Honestly, when I first left, no one thought I would stay abroad for so long. My dad's idea was simply for me to get a good degree from a better university overseas. When I came back, if I was interested, I could take over his business. If not, I could find something I enjoyed doing, like opening a store or a cafe. Basically, he just wanted me to not idle my life away. But after 2 years of high school abroad, I got into Columbia University, though not through the traditional exam route. At the university, I met many people who, like me, weren't great at academics, but excelled in other areas. I started getting involved in niche arts exhibits because of a friend whose family was struggling financially. The steep tuition and living costs in New York had nearly left him with nothing to eat. But his paintings, they were amazing. They were filled with bold, colorful, abstract lines and strange, captivating expressions. One day, a spur-of-the-moment idea hit me and a few of my friends. We found a small venue and held a pop-up art show for him. We picked out the art, promoted it on social media, and surprisingly, it gained some buzz. Some of my friends' paintings even sold for decent prices. After that initial success, a few friends and I started getting into art galleries and art investments. We would discover up-and-coming, lesser-known artists, help them with publicity, and hold exhibitions and auctions for their work. The value of art often rises with the story behind it. We would buy pieces with potential, repackage them with a compelling narrative, and then sell them for at least 10 times more than what we paid. The scale of our operation wasn't huge, and we had our share of good and bad results, but overall, it wasn't too shabby. By my junior year, I was making enough money to fully cover my own living expenses for the entire year. That gave me a huge sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. After graduating, I started an art investment company with a few of my friends. I spent another 2 years abroad building the company. All in all, I didn't need to ask my family for money anymore. Then came the time when my dad started urging me to come back home. When I first went abroad, I missed home and the food in China every single day. Back then, my dad would always encourage me to hang in there. After I graduated, he started pushing me to return. But I couldn't just leave the projects I was working on with my like-minded friends, so I kept postponing the decision, month after month. But lately, when I called my dad, he hadn't been mentioning me coming back as much. That was until I received a call from back home. My dad was in the hospital. That's when I found out a lot of things I hadn't known before, like how our family's business had been struggling for the past couple of years. The rise of e-commerce and live streaming had hit the real economy hard, and with the real estate market declining, my dad had been bearing all the pressure without telling me a word about it. He had fallen sick while he was at the bank dealing with asset collateral to manage the company's cash flow. It was probably due to too much stress and fatigue, without any proper rest. He had fainted right after he got out of the car at home. By the time I rushed back to China on an overnight flight, my dad was at home, resting with an IV drip in his arm. The family doctor was packing up his medical kit nearby. My dad was half lying on the bed. He looked okay, just a bit pale and thinner than I remembered. Seeing him like that made my eyes well up, and I called out, "Dad?" My dad smiled weakly and said, "I told you it's nothing serious, just low blood sugar or maybe heat stroke." Later, after grilling the doctor and confirming that it wasn't anything major, I finally felt relieved. Dad needed to rest, but his contracts and business dealings couldn't just stop. Many things required his personal presence, so I had to step in for him. Of course, I wasn't making any major decisions. I was just acting as his representative to push forward the collaborations he had already agreed upon, with his personal assistant guiding me through everything. I dropped my bags and jumped right into a mountain of contracts, documents, and data without even having time to adjust to the jet lag. By the third day, I was feeling a bit overwhelmed. That's when I truly realized how tough my dad's life was. The glamorous facade of his success belied the hardships that only he knew. Sometimes, while sitting by his bedside as he ate, he would sigh and look at me, saying, "Once I'm feeling a bit better, I'm going to deal with some of the businesses. I'll either sell them or hand them over. If we wait until we're out of options, it may be too late." I stayed quiet. Some of my dad's friends who were also in the real estate business were already in decline. One of my uncles had gone bankrupt a couple of years ago. Our family was in a relatively better position because my dad had always liked to diversify his investments. But our foundation was built on real estate, and now that foundation was crumbling. If we didn't cut off this decaying part of the business, all of our assets might go down with it. I understood my dad's intentions. He wanted to act while there was still time, to leave me with some money instead of a complete fiasco. I was deep in thought about all of this when the housekeeper came in and told my dad that a student he had sponsored in the past had heard about his illness and had come to visit. When I first went abroad, I was young and naive, and I used to fantasize about running into Chloe after I returned home. Every scenario I played out in my head had me coming back as a successful and confident person, with Chloe standing there, looking a bit nervous, asking me, "Alex, why didn't you tell me you were leaving?" I'd always smile to myself while thinking about it, and then feel a bit wistful, because I knew that in reality, Chloe would never ask me that. Occasionally, my dad would bring up Chloe in our conversations, asking if I remembered my old desk mate. He told me that Chloe had become the top science student in her province, and that she had come with her mom to thank him. He said Chloe wasn't big on doing interviews, but she gave one to promote the story of my dad's sponsorship program. That year, my dad also mentioned that Chloe had asked about me, but he had respected my privacy and didn't give her my contact information. Later, Chloe gave her phone number to my dad and asked him to pass it on to me, saying that I could reach out to her if I ever needed anything. But that was 3 years ago, and my feelings for Chloe had faded over time. Plus, I was busy abroad, discovering niche artists with my friends, completely engrossed in my work. Eventually, I forgot all about it. I never contacted Chloe, and my dad never gave her my number either. Naturally, I hadn't thought about her since. Only when my friends abroad would ask if I had ever had a crush did I vaguely remember her. After all, it had been 9 years. It's not really her that I recalled, but the feelings of that young, naive puppy love. Sweet, sour, and a little bit bitter. So, when I saw Chloe again, I felt only a mild sense of surprise. Nothing more. She followed the housekeeper inside. 9 years had passed, and she had changed a lot. Her once youthful, handsome features had matured, but her eyes now carried a cool, detached vibe. The sharp, proud, and aloof air she once had was more subdued. Her whole demeanor had become more introverted and refined. I knew a little bit about what she had been up to since I kept up with the news from home. I knew she had gone into the field of digital economics after college, a mix of AI, big data, and computer chips. I wasn't too savvy about the technical details, but I had seen her name on China's top 10 young rich list. She was the youngest person on the list, but her rank was near the top. She looked lost in thought as she entered, so I greeted her first. I smiled, standing in the middle of the living room, looked at Chloe, and said, "Chloe, long time no see." She paused, but for some reason she didn't look my way. She just stood there stiffly, as if she were paralyzed. Only after a few long moments did she finally glance over at me. I caught sight of her amber eyes again, as deep as a bottomless pool. I smiled again politely. "Chloe, you're here to see my dad. Thank you. Have you eaten yet?" It was just small talk, but for some reason she just stared at me with those bottomless eyes. After a bit, she just shook her head. I paused for a second, then asked someone to prepare a simple meal for her. After Chloe visited my dad, I kept her company during dinner. She was our guest, after all, so I couldn't just leave her hanging. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, and we chatted like we were old friends. "When did you get back?" she asked, her tone super casual. It felt strangely nostalgic. It was like 9 years ago when she'd see me sneak back to my seat after gym class, and she would place the bottle of water she had bought for me on my desk. "When did you sneak back?" she'd ask then. I chuckled at the memory and told her, "Not too long ago." She just said, "Oh," and went back to eating her noodles. She took a bite, then casually said, "I just spoke with your uncle. I'm planning to move part of my business's operations to CDA and set up a new company there. I'm aiming to hire about 2,000 people. Your uncle has a piece of land on the west side of the city that seems perfect for it." "You're buying that land?" I asked, a bit surprised. My dad had bought that land years ago for cheap, thinking it had potential, but since the government hadn't developed that area yet, it had sort of become a wasted investment. Chloe just nodded. I didn't know what to say. Clearly, buying that piece of land was her way of repaying a favor to my dad. I didn't argue, though. I knew that with her influence now, she could make that area valuable. So, I just thanked her. She nodded again. I noticed how she picked up a couple more strands of noodles with her chopsticks. She used to love noodles back then. Maybe things had changed now that she had a higher status and all, and she didn't like noodles anymore. Watching her eat so slowly, I subconsciously checked my watch. I wasn't trying to rush her, but I had a contract I needed to go sign later that afternoon. Emily noticed my tiny gesture right away. "Got something later?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Some imported crude oil. My dad arranged this contract, and they want me to go over it this afternoon." She frowned for a second, and then advised, "Crude oil? Make sure the contract clearly states that the settlement is based on the weight certificate from the Discharging Ports Inspection Service." Seeing my confused expression, she explained further. "Crude oil has a high risk of water content. If they trick you into accepting oil that's over the acceptable limit, it could explode. Without that specific clause, you'd have to bear all the loss. Plus, someone might try to mess around with the numbers or pocket some money." It hit me then just how much Chloe knew about the business world. "Chloe, you know so much," I said, genuinely amazed. She paused, then laughed. It was a bright, refreshing laugh. I knew why, too. Back when we shared a desk, no matter if it was physics or history, she would patiently help me understand the concepts bit by bit. I would always look at her with admiration and say, "Chloe, you know so much." I laughed, too. It felt like there was no distance between us anymore, like we had gone back to those days before anything had come between us. Now, only the good memories remained. Chloe finished her noodles quickly, and then stood up. "All right, you should get busy. I'll talk to you later about that land, and I'll chat with your uncle, too." She ate slowly, but she left promptly. I checked my watch and headed out the door. Later that day, while reviewing the contract, my dad's assistant confirmed that everything was in order. I remembered Chloe's advice and couldn't help but smile. "Hold on," I said. "Does the contract state that payment is based on the weight certificate from the Discharging Ports Inspection?" The team looked puzzled. I smiled, but remained firm. "If it doesn't, we won't accept the contract." Afterwards, the assistant kept apologizing, grateful that I had caught the oversight. He explained that he had just been too swamped with work to notice something so crucial. I kept my tone polite. "It's all right. My dad's still recovering, so you're busy with everything. Make sure you get some rest when you get back." He wiped his sweaty forehead. That evening, I mentioned the incident to my dad. He didn't say much at first, but then he sighed. "He's been with me for 12 years now." I was quiet for a moment. Then, shifting his tone, my dad looked at me with an appreciative expression. "Alex, you've really grown up. I still remember you as a little kid, always asking for Chloe. Now you handle things so well and you can read people too." He smiled. "And Chloe is a great girl. What's going on between you two?" His first words made me feel proud of my newfound maturity, but his follow-up question caught me completely off guard. "Chloe? What about her?" I replied, puzzled. He just shook his head, laughing. "You young folks, I can't quite figure you out." Then, he seemed ready to rest. So I left his room. Standing in the hallway, I looked at the winding staircase, and that same feeling of uncertainty washed over me again. I started seeing Chloe more often after my dad's condition improved. He didn't go into the office much anymore, choosing to work from home instead. And since Chloe knew our family well, she often visited to see him. My dad seemed to want me to be involved in their discussions, so I would often sit in on their business meetings. I mostly listened, not talking much. One day at dinner, my dad suddenly said with a smile, "Chloe, I've seen the news. Your company is making some big moves lately. As busy as you are, how do you find the time to personally oversee that piece of land in the West?" I instinctively glanced over at Chloe. It was true. For the CEO of a major company, spending every day dealing with a simple land contract was really an overqualification. It would be like a CEO switching to logistics administration. Chloe paused for a moment, but quickly replied without her expression changing. "It's the foundation of a new project, so I need to make sure every detail is flawless." My dad just smiled and said nothing more. After the main framework of the contract was set, I had to handle the finer details. Chloe was incredibly generous and didn't haggle over the price at all. She even offered to buy the land at 40% above the current market price. My dad knew that Chloe was just trying to repay a favor, but in the end, he didn't take the premium. Instead, the extra amount was turned into stock options in Chloe's company, all written under my name. Because of this, I often had to interact with Chloe. Chloe was quite different from how she was in school. Back then, she was so quiet. I could say 10 sentences, and she would only say one. Yet now, I frequently received messages from her. She would send me pictures of strange things she saw on the road, tell me about the business banquets she attended, and even when she went abroad on business trips, she would keep me updated. Sometimes she would even send me pictures of her dinner or updates from her gym sessions. Eventually, I couldn't hold back my curiosity and asked her, "You're at the top of China's new rich list. Aren't you too free every day?" There was a long pause on her end, and then she replied with just 6 dots. "Fair enough." To return the favor, I would occasionally share some details of my daily life with her. She usually responded quickly. If it ever took her more than an hour to reply, she would always explain what she had been doing. I think I might know her daily schedule better than her own assistant. Later, she invited me to a private gathering at her apartment. She said it was all familiar friends and asked if I wanted to join. I had some free time, so I went. Chloe's apartment was not what I expected. I've been to the homes of many of my wealthy friends, and most of them are decorated to match their worth and taste. Chloe's apartment was big, but you could tell that not much time had been spent on decorating it. When I arrived, her friends were already there. I recognized some of them as partners in Chloe's company. They all smiled knowingly at me and said, "Finally, we get to see the real Alex." I pretended not to understand what they meant. I also saw a familiar face in the crowd. Liam. He was sitting in the middle of the sofa, his face just as refined as the first time we met. He smiled and tilted his head at me, waving and saying, "Alex, long time no see." I paused for a moment and then smiled back. Chloe probably heard us talking and came out of the kitchen. She was wearing an apron and had knives in both hands. She smiled when she saw me, and after a quick greeting, she went back to chopping vegetables. This private party wasn't what I had imagined. It was just a bunch of young, successful big shots getting their hands dirty, wrapping dumplings. Maybe that's how they distress. I didn't get it, but Liam was clearly used to it. He smiled and told me, "Don't worry, we don't need to do anything else. Just help wrap the dumplings in a bit." I nodded and sat down next to him. As soon as I sat down, Chloe shouted for me from the kitchen. I gave Liam a helpless smile, and with his meaningful gaze following me, I went to the kitchen. Chloe stood there confidently, ordering me to wash veggies, beat eggs, and soak some glass noodles. I just stood by her side quietly, washing Napa cabbage while she ambitiously chopped meat. Occasionally, I would glance sideways at her and see the beautiful lines of her profile. She smiled, asking, "Is it nice to look at?" I was momentarily confused, so she asked again, holding back her smile, "Is it nice?" I nodded. "It's nice. Weren't you voted as the modern single youth's most desirable New Age woman online?" Then, after a pause, I added with a smile, "You were #1. Aren't you touched?" She seemed to pause before saying, "Not really." While I was washing the greens, I looked at her, puzzled. "Not really?" She kept chopping. "Not really." I paused and then softly said, "Isn't Liam quite good?" Her chopping hands paused. She turned to look at me seriously and said, "We're just friends. Plus, he married Lucy right after we graduated from college. She's the one you saw when you first came in, the one who said they finally saw the real you." "Then what about you and—" "Where's Maya?" I said, "Why should I tell you?" She laughed, and the strength and sound of her chopping became noticeably louder. "I know even if you don't tell me," she said. "I saw her wedding pictures on your Instagram a year ago. You were the best man, smiling like a flower." I was curious. "How did you know my Instagram?" She pursed her lips, refusing to answer, just chopping away forcefully. "All right, don't tell me then. Let's see how long you can keep it a secret. I'm not in a hurry." After we finished eating the dumplings, everyone bustled around to clean up, while Liam and I lay on the couch, patting our stuffed bellies. Liam suddenly winked at me and asked, "Alex, want to check out Chloe's collection?" I was interested. He led me to Chloe's study. Before we entered, he seemed to remember something. And don't get me wrong, we know our way around here because we often have meetings in her apartment. He pointed to a whole chalkboard covered in chaotic data that I couldn't understand, saying, "Chloe's place is like a pigsty, which is perfect for brainstorming." I laughed. Chloe's collection wasn't much, just some trophies and certificates she had won over the years, and lots of photos of her receiving awards. It was a visual sign of her growth and success. Liam pulled out a photo album and started flipping through it with me. I suddenly paused in the middle, seeing a photo of Chloe standing in front of the main entrance of Columbia University. She was looking expressionlessly at the camera, her eyes cold, but with a faint hint of sadness. Liam stared at me as I was lost over that photo. Then he checked the doorway before turning back to me. "That was during our sophomore year of college," he said. "Chloe got accepted for a week-long exchange program at Columbia." He paused, his voice serious. "She went there looking for you, Alex. I thought she would find you, but for some reason, ever since she came back from the States, she was down for a very long time. Maybe she didn't find you, or maybe she found you and you turned her away. Honestly, I never really liked you back in high school. You didn't even tell Chloe you were leaving the country. I feel like you never really saw her as a friend." He continued, "But Chloe would always say it was her fault. She said she was the one who pushed you away out of youthful insecurity and the pride of poverty. She said it was her problem. Over the years, many men have liked her, but she's always seemed distracted. When we graduated from high school, she was the top science student in the exams, and we all went out to celebrate her success. I remember the restaurant we were in had a huge world map on one of the walls. Everyone was in high spirits, but she just stood in front of that map, sighed, and asked me, "Liam, how far is it from CDA to Manhattan, New York? Can I ever catch up?" The first time I saw Chloe smile like that again was a year ago, when your friend Maya got married. She said she had misunderstood something. She said that maybe her chance had finally come. If it weren't for her business commitments here, she probably would have gone to find you right away. When she started her own business, she worked tirelessly. We all wondered why she was pushing herself so hard. She said she was like a summer cicada, and the boy she liked was a bird, flying to places she couldn't reach. She said she could only work really, really hard to try and match its journey. I was stunned just listening to him. Then, Liam looked me up and down, smiled, and asked, "And what about you, Alex? How do you see Chloe now? Do you really think she's just that cicada?" What do I think? Honestly, I'm bewildered. I had no clue there was this whole other story going on behind the scenes. Like how she had mustered up the courage to hand my dad that piece of paper with her phone number on it, or how she had quietly followed my Instagram account for years, or that she had flown all the way to Manhattan, to Columbia University, looking for me. All of which I knew nothing about. Back then, Maya was always looking out for me. I guess when Chloe finally mustered up the courage to find me, she saw Maya around and misunderstood the situation. But there are things I do know. Like how she came to see my dad the moment she heard he was sick. She's at a whole other level now, with a business that has promising potential in the market, and the banks all respect her. Or how she pointed out the critical issues with my contracts, helped my family with our land issues, and meticulously updated me on her daily schedule, slowly pulling me into her social circle. When Liam and I walked out of the study, Chloe stood up and looked at me nervously, asking Liam, "What were you showing him?" Liam, still cheerful, said, "Oh, just some of your embarrassing moments from the past." Chloe laughed. She carries herself with such confidence now, with a sense of control and composure that I'm becoming familiar with. She sat back down on the couch, laughing. "Show me too, then. I can't remember anything embarrassing." Everyone laughed. In the midst of that laughter, I watched Chloe. Her features are delicate, and she had a faint smile on her face. I softly called out her name. "Chloe." She quickly turned to me, her tiny reflection in her dark eyes, and gently replied, "Yes?" I smiled, not saying anything more. My heart felt full, but not in a dark or heavy way. It was like my whole heart was floating in warm water, an unreal feeling with a mix of emotions, sentiment, bitterness, heartache, and regret. But that's okay, I thought. It's okay. Things are different now. We've got plenty of time, her and I. I glanced at Chloe, who was sitting by my side. She was listening to someone else talk, but she was absent-mindedly peeling a macadamia nut. It's my favorite nut, but I always find peeling it to be a hassle. I watched her. Sure enough, after she had peeled it, she instinctively handed it to me, her left hand extending in my direction. I took the nut from her palm and watched as she naturally reached for the next one. It was a habit from our freshman year of high school, a habit she still hasn't shaken. I chuckled to myself and popped the macadamia nut into my mouth. It's okay, I thought. Chloe and I have plenty of time. I've made peace with the version of Chloe who, in our youth, pretended to dislike Alex out of self-respect and pride. Because I equally disliked the person she became, the one who pushed me further and further away. We're even now. We've got time to take it slow. Everything is still possible. The storm that brewed in our youth has only just begun to howl today.